Salaam alaikum, and welcome back to another episode in our continuing series on Mohammed Ali Amir-Moezzi's groundbreaking work, The Divine Guide in Early Shi'ism. If you've been following along, you know that we've been making our way carefully through this amazing book, which has done more than perhaps any other modern academic work to recover the authentic doctrinal teachings of early Imamism, the Imamism of the Imams, as transmitted through our Hadith literature. In our previous episodes, we completed our coverage of Chapter 1, and we've been working through Chapter 2, which deals with the pre-existence of the Imam. We've covered some truly remarkable material: the doctrine of the divine light, the pre-existential worlds, the creation of luminous silhouettes, the sacred pact, the mithaq, the primordial initiation, where the impeccables taught the sacred sciences to the shadows of pure beings, the creation from the clay of Iliyin and Sijin, and finally the extraordinary voyage of the light of Muhammad and Ali through the generations of humanity, through loins and wombs, from Adam all the way down to the historical prophet and the historical Ali, and from them to the remaining Imams. Now today we arrive at a section titled Vision with the Heart, al-ru'ya bil-qalb. This is in many ways one of the most important passages in this entire book, because what Amir-Moezzi does here is he shows all of the cosmogonic doctrines that we've been studying, all those pre-existential worlds, the creation from light, the consubstantiality of the believer's heart with the body of the Imam, and how all of that is not merely abstract metaphysics. It is the doctrinal foundation for a living spiritual practice. It connects cosmogony to anthropology. What I mean here is the cosmic principles and how it relates to human creation. It connects theology to spirituality and the pre-existential to the existential. And I have to stress, Amir-Moezzi himself notes that this idea, this practice of vision with the heart, has gone essentially unnoticed in the scholarship up to the time of his writing. Unnoticed, yeah. A foundational spiritual practice of early Imamism, sitting right there in the Hadith collections, and scholars have simply overlooked it. This is precisely the kind of recovery work that makes Amir-Moezzi's scholarship so vital, and it's precisely the kind of thing that happens when you actually take the Hadith literature of the Imams seriously and on its own terms. To get to the practice of vision with the heart, Amir-Moezzi first lays out some fundamental points of Imamite theology. And these theological foundations are absolutely essential. So we're going to take our time with them. Let's begin. The starting point is the theology of the Imams regarding God, the absolute, eternal, divine being. According to the traditions of the Imams, and we're talking about traditions found in the most authoritative collections, in al-Kulayni's al-Kafi, in Sheikh Saduq's Tawhid, and elsewhere, that God absolutely transcends all intelligence, all imagination, all thought. In his absolute being, God remains what Amir-Moezzi calls the inconceivable transcendent. He cannot be described or apprehended except in the terms with which he has described himself in his own revelations. Now, let me give you some specific traditions that Amir-Moezzi draws upon, because they're remarkable in their precision and in their philosophical depth. Imam Baqir, the fifth Imam, was asked, is it permitted to say that God is a thing, using the Arabic word Shi'i? And Imam al-Baqir replied, yes, since this term places God outside the two limits of agnosticism and assimilationism. That is, outside ta'til and tashbih. Ta'til is the error of stripping God of all attributes to the point where you effectively deny that anything meaningful can be even said about him. A kind of theological nihilism. And tashbih is the opposite. It's like likening God to created things, anthropomorphism, giving God a body or a form or spatial location. The word Shi'i, thing, in Arabic has maximum neutrality. It's almost contentless generality. It threads the needle between these two extremes. God is something, He is not nothing, but that something is utterly unlike anything that you can conceive. Salaam, the sixth Imam, elaborated, God is a thing different from things. By thing, we mean the deep meaning, that is the reality of thingness, without body or form. And notice what the Imam is saying here. He is taking the most basic ontological category, thingness, the sheer fact of being something rather than nothing. And he's saying that this is the only thing that can be positively predicated to God. Everything else, body, form, spatial extension, temporal duration, all of that is negated. And then there is this extraordinary tradition from the ninth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Jawad alayhi salam. When asked whether one can imagine God as a thing, he said yes, but as a thing unintelligible, meaning beyond the intellect and indefinite. He is different from everything that can fall into the field of your imagination as a thing. No thing is like him, and no imagination can apprehend him. And how would imaginations apprehend him when he is something other than that which is intelligible, other than all that imaginations can conceive? One cannot imagine him other than something that is unintelligible and indefinite. What the Imam is saying is that, yes, you can direct your imagination towards God, but what you arrive at is precisely the failure of imagination. You arrive at the recognition that He's beyond the intelligible, beyond the conceivable. The imagination reaches towards God and finds not an image, not a concept, but an awareness of its own inadequacy. This is similar in concept to what is termed in Greek philosophy as Apophatic theology. Not sure if I pronounce it correctly, but it is the practice of describing God or the divine being through negation, focusing on what God is not rather than what God is. Amir-Moezzi notes that in the traditions of purely theological character, there is an entire series of negations in the words of the Imams on the subject of God. Negation of body or form, negation of space, negation of time, negation of immobility and movement, negation of descent and ascent, negation of qualification and representation, and so on and so forth. And the list is extensive. God in his essence is beyond every category that the human mind can deploy. Now, having established God's absolute transcendence, the Imam's theology doesn't stop here. Because if God were only the unknowable, the inconceivable, the utterly transcendent, then creation would have no access to him whatsoever. There would be no religion, no worship, no knowledge of God at all. And that's not the case. God, in his infinite mercy, wanted his creatures to be able to know him. And so he gave himself a certain number of names or attributes. And here the Imams introduce a crucial distinction, the distinction between the attributes of essence, sifat al-dhat, and the attributes of act, sifat al-fi'l. The attributes of essence are those that God is possessed for all eternity, absolutely, without the presence of their opposites. God is always high, living. He can never be otherwise. He has always been alim, knowing. He can absolutely never be unknowing. Likewise, he is just, powerful, seeing, hearing. These attributes are eternal, necessary, and without any opposite. There was never a time, if you can even use that word, when God was not living, not knowing, not powerful. The attributes of act, on the other hand, did not become operative until after creation. They are those attributes whose opposites can also qualify God. He is afu, indulgent or forgiving, but he is also muntaqim, vengeful, retributive. He can be radi, satisfied and pleased, but he can also be sakhit, angry and wrathful. These attributes are relational. They always existed, but they come into play in God's interaction with his creation. They presuppose a created order upon which they act. But here's the critical question, and here is where Amir-Moezzi's analysis becomes truly illuminating. How do these attributes become operative? How do the names and attributes of God actually reach creation? And how does the unknowable God become known? The answer, according to the traditions of the Imams, is stunning in its implications. The attributes of God revealed to humanity through the most beautiful names, al-Asma al-Husna, have places of manifestation. They have vehicles, they have organs. And these vehicles, these active organs of God, are the Imams. Let me read you some of the traditions that Amir-Moezzi cites, because they're among the most profound statements in all of Imamite literature. And you can find the Hadith reference for each statement in his book. Throughout the traditions, the Imams again and again repeat, we are the eye of God, Ain Allah. We are the hand of God, Yadullah. His face, Wajh. His heart, Qalb. His side, Janb. His tongue, Lisan. His ear, Udhn. We are the most beautiful names of God. Now, we need to be very careful here, because this is a point where misunderstanding is easy and where the theology is extraordinarily precise. The Imams are not saying that they are God. They are not claiming divinity. That would be the heresy of ghulu or extremism, which the Imams themselves condemned in the strongest possible terms. What they're saying is something far more subtle and far more profound. They're saying that God, in his essence, is absolutely beyond reach. No creature can access the divine essence. But God has chosen to make himself known, to manifest his attributes through specific designated instruments. And those instruments are the Imams. When the tradition says the Imam is the eye of God, it means that the way the Imam looks at you is how Allah would look at you. His look is like the look of Allah. If the Imam looks at you with an affectionate eye, then Allah is looking at you with affection. If the Imam looks at you with anger, then Allah is looking at you with anger. Thus, God's attribute of seeing becomes operative and manifest in creation through the Imam. Similarly, the Imam is the face of God, Wajh Allah, meaning that Imam is that by which God is turned toward his creation, that through which the creatures are led to him, through his face, through the Imam. When it says the Imam is the hand of God, it means that God's power, his grace, his action in the world is channeled through the Imam. However, it is vital to distinguish this functional manifestation from the heresy of divine incarnation or hulul. The Imams and early scholars like Sheikh Saduq vehemently rejected any claim that God's essence is literally incarnated in human flesh or that the Imam shares in the independent Godhead. Instead, the Imam remains a servant of God, created and subordinate, acting only as a mirror through which the divine light is reflected to the world. To equate the organ of manifestation with the essence itself would be to fall into the very error of ghulu that the Imams themselves condemned. This is the doctrine of the Imam as mazhar, as the locus of divine manifestation. And Amir-Moezzi is absolutely right to emphasize how central this is to early Imamism. It's not a marginal doctrine, it's not a later philosophical development. It's right there in the earliest Hadith collections, in the words of the Imams themselves. And notice the comprehensiveness of the claim. The Imams don't say we manifest some of God's attributes. They say we are the most beautiful names of God. Nahnu asma Allah al-husna. All of the names, all of the attributes that God has chosen to manifest. The Imam is the complete way that God wants to show himself to the world. I should note that this doctrine finds extensive support in the Hadith collections, even beyond what Amir-Moezzi directly cites. In al-Kafi, in Kitab al-Hujjah, there are numerous traditions elaborating on this theme. al-Kulayni dedicates entire chapters, abwab, to the idea that the Imams are the proofs of God, the gates of God, the pillars of the earth. And in the Biharul Anwar of al-Majlisi, these traditions are collected and organized in even greater detail. The sheer volume of this material is overwhelming, and it all points in the same direction. The Imam is not merely a political leader. He's not merely a legal authority, neither just a pious exemplar or a pious scholar. The Imam is the fundamental, essential link between God and creation. Without the Imam, there is no access to God whatsoever. And this brings us to a truly remarkable theological insight that Amir-Moezzi draws out. Based on this doctrine, Amir-Moezzi identifies two fundamental plans, two levels of the divine being. The first is the plan of essence, Dhat. This is the level of the indescribable, the inconceivable, that which is beyond all intelligence, beyond intuition, thought. This is what Amir-Moezzi calls the plan of the unknowable. The essence of God is like an infinite abyss into which no created intellect can even peer. It is the God who is utterly hidden, utterly beyond. The second is the plan of acts, af'al, performed by the organs of God, the Imams. These are the instruments capable of making known to the creatures what can be known of God. This is the plan of the manifest God, the unknown aspiring to be known. It is important to emphasize again that this functional manifestation must not be mixed with the heresy of divine incarnation, hulul, which the Imams themselves condemned as a ghulu, extremism. The Imam remains a created, a subordinate servant of God, acting only as the vehicle of the divine attributes. And here Amir-Moezzi makes a observation that I think is absolutely brilliant, and it connects everything we've been studying in this series. He suggests that the division between the divine essence and the Imam as its manifestation mirrors the universal principle of batin and zahir. If you remember from the previous episodes, the fundamental structural principle and a recurring theme of Imamite thought that everything has an apparent exoteric dimension and a hidden esoteric dimension. And this applies even to God himself. The batin of God is his essence, eternally inaccessible, forever hidden, the ultimate esoteric reality. But the zahir of God, his manifest exoteric aspect, is the Imam. This is a staggering claim, and Amir-Moezzi is right to highlight it. It means that the zahir-batin structure is not merely an interpretive principle applied to the Quran or a way of organizing religious knowledge. It is a cosmic principle. It is built into the very nature of the divine being's relationship with creation. God himself has an exoteric and an esoteric dimension. In the exoteric dimension of God, the way God faces creation, the way God is accessible, is the Imam. And this leads to a conclusion that Amir-Moezzi states very clearly. Knowledge of the reality of the Imam is the equivalent to knowledge of that which can be known of God. Let me repeat that because it's one of the most important sentences in the entire book. Knowledge of the reality of the Imam is the equivalent to knowledge of that which can be known of God. This is not a metaphor or a hyperbole. This is a theological conclusion of the doctrines that we've been tracing. If God's essence is unknowable, and if the Imam is the sole vehicle through which God's attributes are manifested, then knowing the Imam is knowing God. The marifat of the Imam is the marifat of Allah. And this brings us to the question of why creation exists at all. Amir-Moezzi cites a tradition from the third Imam, Imam Hussein, alayhi salam, that lays out this very clearly. Imam al-Hussein said, God created his servants so that they might know him, for when they know him, they worship him, and thus free themselves from the worship of anything that is not him. Someone then asked, what is knowledge of God? And al-Hussein replied, it is for the people of each age knowledge of the Imam, to which they owe obeisance. And let that sink in. The purpose of creation, the reason God brought anything into being, is so that his creatures might know him. And to know him means to know the Imam of your time. This is the reason for existence of the entire cosmos. The Imam is not an afterthought. The Imam is not a political convenience. The Imam is the reason the universe exists. And the Imams themselves confirm this repeatedly. Amir-Moezzi cites several traditions to this effect. The Imams say, he who knows us knows God, and he who does not know us does not know God. They repeat this. It's a constant message. Imam Jafar as-Sadiq says, it is because of us that God is known, and because of us that he is worshipped. And then there is this extraordinary comprehensive statement from Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam that Amir-Moezzi quotes. And I want to read it in full because it's one of the most remarkable passages in all of Imamite Hadith literature. The Imam says, without God, we would not be known, and without us, God would not be known. God made us his eye among his worshippers, his speaking tongue among his creatures, his hand of kindness and mercy stretched out to his servants, his face by which one is led to him, his threshold that leads to him, his treasure in heaven and on earth. It is by our service that God is served. Without us, God would not be worshipped. Now it's important to note that we normally translate the word ibadah in Arabic to worship. Although the word ibadah in Arabic carries much more broader spiritual weight. It is derived from the same linguistic root as the word abd, meaning bondsman or servant. Therefore, while the English word worship typically implies specific acts of ritual or adoration, ibadah, on the other hand, means to be bound to Allah. It is a total state of submission that permeates every facet of a person's life. And when performed with the correct intention and of awareness of this absolute servanthood, even ordinary day-to-day mundane actions are elevated to an act of worship, to ibadah. So the Imam is saying, without us, God would not be worshipped. Think about the weight of this statement. It means that all authentic ibadah of Allah throughout all of history, in every age and every place, has been mediated through the Imam. Every prophet who worshipped God truly did so through the light of walaya. Every believer who turns to God in sincere devotion does so through the Imam, whether they know it or not. The Imam is not just a guide in the sense of someone who points the way. The Imam is the way itself. The Imam is the threshold, the bab, the door of Allah, through which one passes to reach Allah. And without that door, there is no passage. This is supported by the Quranic designations that the traditions apply to the Imam, and which Amir-Moezzi lists very carefully in his book. The Imam is called Hujjat Allah, the proof of God, Khalifat Allah, the vicegerent of God, Sirat Allah, the path of God, Bab Allah, the threshold or the gate of God. And the Imams are described by Quranic expressions such as al-Ayat al-Kubra, the supreme sign, al-Mathal al-Ala, the august symbol, and al-Urwat al-Wuthqa, the most solid handle. Each of these Quranic terms, when applied to the Imam through the Tawil, the esoteric interpretation of the Imams themselves, reinforces the same point. The Imam is the supreme mediating reality between God and creation. Remember what we learned in the previous episodes. In the pre-existential worlds, the spirits and hearts of the faithful believers were created from the same clay as the body of the Imam. There is a consubstantiality, a shared substance between the heart of the believer and the body of the Imam. And we noted this point specifically when we discussed the creation from Illiyin and Sijin. Amir-Moezzi explained that this shared substance provides the spiritual and the logical groundwork for the most vital practice in early Imamism, seeing with the heart, known as al-ru'ya. Now we can see the full picture. The believer's heart is made from the Imam's substance, and the Imam is the manifest face of God, the organ through which God makes himself known. Therefore, the believer, by turning inward to the heart, which is by its nature and essence connected to the Imam, because they are made from the same material. And the believer can, by turning inward into the heart, can achieve a kind of spiritual vision, a direct perception of the divine reality as manifested through the Imam. This is what Amir-Moezzi calls a spiritual practice founded on subtle anatomy, the idea that the human being has an inner structure, a spiritual anatomy that corresponds to metaphysical realities. The heart is not merely a physical organ. It is not just flesh made from material. It is the locus where the substance of the Imam resides within the believer. And through this shared substance, the heart becomes a kind of spiritual eye capable of perceiving the Imam. And through the Imam of perceiving what can be perceived of God. This is, as Amir-Moezzi notes, an anthropological dimension of Imamism. It tells us something about what a human being is according to Imamite doctrine. The human being, at least the believing human being, the mu'min, the believer, carries within their very substance a connection to the Imam. The heart is the seat of this connection, and the spiritual life consists, at least in part, in activating this connection, in learning to see with the heart. And this, I want to emphasize, is not some later Sufi importation into Shi'ism. This is not borrowed from Ibn Arabi or from other external source. This is grounded in the cosmogonic tradition of the Imams themselves. In the earliest books of Imamite Hadith literature, it is, as Amir-Moezzi says, a doctrine that has gone unnoticed. But it has always been there, waiting to be recovered by someone willing to read the sources carefully and to take them seriously on their own terms. One of the greatest tragedies of the rationalist or the Usuli dominance in Shia intellectual history is that it shifted the center of gravity in Shi'i thought away from the Hadith of the Imams and towards their rational legal methodology. The Usuli project, with its emphasis on ijtihad, on the authority of the mujtahid, on rational principles of jurisprudence, usul fiqh, all of this had the effect of marginalizing precisely the kind of material we've been studying. The cosmogonic traditions, the theological traditions about the Imam as the organ of God, the traditions about vision with the heart, these were pushed to the side. They were treated as aqaid, beliefs that could be acknowledged in passing, but that didn't really affect the practical business of day-to-day worship. And this became dominant in the seminaries. It became a dominant concern of the seminary. But scholars like Muhammad Amin Astarabadi, like Yusuf Bahraini and Sayyid Ni'matullah al-Jazairi, these scholars insisted that the words of the Imams are the primary source of all religious knowledge, not just legal knowledge, all knowledge. Theological, spiritual, cosmological, eschatological. The Imams are, as the tradition says, the treasures of God's knowledge. And the approach of these scholars was to go straight to the treasure, not to stand outside the treasure house constructing rational arguments about what might be inside, but actually to go in and read the Hadith, to receive the teachings, to let the Imams be our teachers, as they were meant to be. And when we do that, when we actually immerse ourselves in the Hadith literature with the kind of care and attention that Amir-Moezzi brings to it, what we find is not a dry legal tradition. What we find is a vast, coherent, breathtakingly profound spiritual and metaphysical worldview. We find a complete cosmogony, a complete theology, complete anthropology, and the foundations of a complete spiritual practice, all of it centered on the figure of the Imam. This is what Amir-Moezzi is recovering for us. And this is why his work is so important. He's not inventing anything. He's not imposing external categories on the tradition. He's simply reading the sources. al-Kafi, the works of Sheikh Saduq, Basar al-Darajat, and all the other early compilations. And he's letting them speak for themselves. And what they say is that early Imamism was an esoteric, initiatory tradition of extraordinary depth and sophistication, centered on the figure of the divinely guided Imam as the sole bridge between the unknowable God and his creation. The great scholar Yusuf Bahraini, in his work Al-Hadaiq al-Nadira, repeatedly emphasized that the tradition of the Imams contain depths of meaning that cannot be exhausted by rational analysis alone. They require a receptive heart. And here we come full circle, a heart that is open to the light of the Imam. The very practice that Amir-Moezzi is describing, vision with the heart, is in a sense the method by which this approach, the Hadith approach, operates. You receive the words of the Imams not merely with the rational intellect, but with your heart, which is ontologically, meaning that its substance and essence is connected to the Imam, being of the same material. And this is why the classical traditionist scholars insisted on the importance of Hadith over rational demonstration, not because they were anti-rational, but because they understood that the deepest truths of religion are received through a faculty that transcends our rational mind. It is through the heart that was created from the substance of the Imam. Let me now try to synthesize what we've covered today, because the architecture of this material is just truly magnificent when you see it all together. We began with the absolute transcendence of God, the divine essence that is beyond all conception, beyond all imagination, all thought. God is the ultimate batin, the ultimate hidden reality. Then we saw that God in his mercy manifests himself through attributes, the attributes of essence and the attributes of act, and that these attributes require vehicles, organs, instruments through which to become operative in creation. And these organs are the Imams. The eye, the hand, the face, the tongue, the heart, the ear of God. The Imams are the most beautiful names of God made manifest. They are the Zahir of the divine being, the outward or the exoteric face of God turned towards creation. And from this follows the extraordinary conclusion that knowledge of the Imam is knowledge of God. Marifah of the Imam is marifah of Allah, to the fullest extent that God can be known. The Imam is the reason for creation, the goal of creation, and the means by which God is worshipped. And all of this connects back to the cosmogonic data we studied in the previous episodes. The believer's heart, created from the substance of the Imam's body in the pre-existential worlds, carries within it, in its very nature and essence, a connection to the Imam. This connection is the basis for the spiritual practice of al-ru'ya bil-qalb, vision with the heart, through which the believer can perceive the Imam, and through the Imam perceive the manifest face of God. However, there's a very important point that needs to be clarified. And it is that this deep spiritual bond that we're discussing here between the heart of the believer and the substance of the Imam, it's not a two-way conversation. Meaning that it's not a way to receive specific messages or instructions or new religious teachings from the Imam. One should not think of it as a form of personal revelation or some kind of telepathy. Instead, this connection acts as a natural pull of the heart, an inner gravity that draws the believer towards the Imam. It creates a deep sense of love and spiritual attraction, focusing on the heart's devotion and alignment rather than the exchange of information. As we close today's episode, I want to leave you with something to reflect on. The tradition from Imam Hussain alayhi salam that we discussed. Knowledge of God is for the people of each age, knowledge of the Imam, to which they owe obedience. This is not merely a historical statement about the past. For 12er Shi'ism, the Imam of our age is the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, Muhammad ibn al-Hassan, peace be upon him, who is present but in occultation, and may Allah hasten his reappearance. The doctrine we've been studying today implies that even in occultation, the Imam remains the face of God, turned towards creation, the organ through which God's attributes are manifest, and the threshold through which God is reached. And the means of reaching the Imam, who is an occultation, the means of seeing him, even in his hiddenness, is the heart. The heart that was created from his substance, the heart that, when purified and turned inward, can perceive what the physical eyes cannot see, or where the rational mind cannot reach. This is the spirituality of early Imamism. This is what the Hadith literature preserves for us. And this is what scholars like Amir-Moezzi are recovering, not inventing, recovering from the vast ocean of the Imam's teachings. In our next episode, we will continue through chapter 2, exploring further dimensions of the Imam's existence and the implications of these doctrines on the spiritual life of the believer. Until then, I encourage you to reflect on the material that we've covered, to go through the sources, through al-Kafi, through Tawhid by Sheikh Saduq, through Basair al-Darajat, and to read all these traditions for yourself. Let the Imam speak to you, to us directly. Thank you for listening, and may God increase us all in knowledge and understanding.